What we're watching now feels like the final season of an otherwise endless soap opera that's come to the end of the road. Too few viewers taken in, far less caring, writers and actors phoning in their contributions, and the audience almost entirely moved on, no longer able to bear it. Hardly anyone's buying it any longer, this badly written, badly directed, badly acted farce of all farces. Time to call time of death, I would suggest. Roll the credits one last time, because the attention of the watching billions is increasingly focused elsewhere, on more credible plot lines. This week saw the 23rd anniversary of the event that changed the world for everyone alive, being the 9/11 destruction of the World Trade Center. There are adults in the world now born after that moment, grown adults who can't remember the world of before. It used to be said the First World War was a set of iron railings separating what had gone before from everything that came after. 9/11 feels like that. Whether you remember watching it on the day or whether it's history from before your time, the dropping of those twin towers changed everything. In some strange way, the footage seems to play on an endless loop, whether anyone is watching or not. Somewhere, always and forever, the images of the planes, the explosions, the burning, the way the towers dropped one after the other as though stamped on by an invisible foot, a flashback for the whole world, brought to mind by passenger planes against cloudless skies and skylines, by skyscrapers like tall poppies, footage of demolitions. By now, fewer people believe the official narrative of that timeless horror. By now, the plot holes, still dismissed by officialdom, furiously dismissed as the stuff of conspiracy theory, have, for increasing numbers, rendered the official 9/11 story into something too worn out to accept any longer. Too many questions have risen, like the clouds of dust that billowed above the debris after the thunderous falling. Whatever really happened that day, and no one forgets that thousands of innocent souls were murdered, the notion that officialdom told the whole truth about it all is gone for many, if not most, leaving questions and suspicion in its place. As well as the thousands who died on 9/11 itself, the so-called war on terror that then ensued and that's with us yet has killed millions more, directly or indirectly. In came the Patriot Act for Americans, an end to privacy, and an attitude of nation-states towards their citizens that has been replicated and perpetuated one way or another by one government after another ever since. Islam was recast then as the source of the world's darkest villainy, in spite of the fact the United States had for decades been at least partly responsible for conjuring extremist Islamism into being and then using it for its own ends. Mujahideen, Taliban, Al-Qaeda. So much changed after 9/11, and therefore the official narrative has to be defended to the death. If that domino were to fall, what then? But the undeniable truth now is simply that too many experts, credible people with no axe to grind save curiosity and the insistence on official transparency and honesty, have disputed the claim those towers dropped into their own footprints only on account of fires made of spilled aviation fuel that melted steel. Too many experts and grieving citizens have contemplated the official account of the dropping of Building 7, also perfectly and symmetrically, into its own footprint and found it wanting. Officially, the fire weakened the structure very evenly, as it turned out, at all four corners at once and completely, so that it too dropped as though pulled earthwards by invisible strings. Too many questions have surfaced since and refused to go away. The old answers are wearing thin, at least in places. The family of British man Jeff Campbell, among the nearly 3,000 people who perished in the Twin Towers, continue to challenge in the courts the narrative that the destruction of the North Tower in which he died was caused by the impact of American Airlines Flight 11. Their lawyer alleged in a British court this week that significant evidence showed both Twin Towers and Building 7 were destroyed by explosives and incendiaries. Mr. Campbell's family want a new inquest to investigate the events that caused his death. Perhaps the official narrative of 9/11 has lasted this long, is still standing, only because to contemplate the thought that we were given, let's say, an inaccurate or at least incomplete explanation for it all is too much for too many to bear. Profound lies, millions dead, life changed forever. The authorities have only themselves to blame for the loss of trust in what they have had to say, what they still say about anything and everything. By which I mean the authorities not just in the US, but the so-called authorities everywhere. It took a lifetime following the murder of John F. Kennedy in Dallas, Texas in 1963 before the official line about a lone shooter high in a window of a book depository was itself shot down. By now it's uncontroversial to claim Jack Kennedy was murdered by the so-called deep state. His nephew, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., sometime presidential candidate now supporting Donald Trump's campaign, is on record claiming his uncle, JFK, and also his own father, Bobby Kennedy Sr., were murdered by the CIA. Credulity in the official version of events regarding 9/11 lasted a third as long. I say again that the authorities have only themselves to blame. In 2020, the whole world was enveloped by what the authorities told us was a pandemic. The world was shut down, its heartbeat shocked to a standstill, because those authorities said that to have done otherwise would have been catastrophic. What then ensued by official command, trumpeted by officialdom, the mass media and celebrities alike, in the form of national lockdowns, cancelled education, impaired health, loss of income, the pushing of medical products into billions of men, women, pregnant women, children and babies, the death or damaged lives of uncounted millions was catastrophic anyway. The world was changed for everyone and forever by the events of 9/11. The world was changed again by the way the authorities handled COVID. Say what you want about the way they did it, love it or loathe it, but the falsehoods and propaganda with which we were swamped ended for millions, if not billions of people, once and forever, any trust they had in those in positions of power over their lives. Millions of people all over the world have felt inclined to review much, if not everything, they have been told about that world. Call it conspiracy theory if you must, but for many a conspiracy theory is just a matter of knowing first what everyone else will have to know eventually. Podcaster Joe Rogan said recently in his stand-up comedy act that not so long ago he thought vaccination was the greatest achievement of science, but that by now he doesn't believe we went to the moon. I know how Rogan feels. Trust is gone. Faith in the establishment is gone as never before. We know they've told lies. What we need to know now is how much have they lied and for how long. In fact, have they ever told the truth? If that makes me a conspiracy theorist, then fine. As far as I'm concerned, the explanation for all of it is the way money is created and distributed. Put simply and honestly and undeniably, the creation and distribution of all money has been for centuries entirely in the hands of private business. Money creation and distribution is a private business run by secretive individuals for profit. They're unaccountable and unelected. We hear a lot about the so-called military-industrial complex. I prefer the simpler term war machine. War is the most profitable racket there has ever been, and the war machine depends on it. World War I followed the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913. World War II ended the Great Depression of the 1930s. The war machine is never shut down, rather kept running, and so war follows war follows war. JFK tried to get in the way of the war in Vietnam and died. The war on terror followed 9/11 and has never stopped. No sooner had the millions started asking questions about the so-called pandemic than a supremely profitable proxy war erupted in Ukraine. Whatever else happens in the world, the wheels and gears of the war machine are always mindlessly, cheerfully whirling. But now, by now, after one too many big plays, that long-running, distracting soap opera, the one we're supposed to watch instead of what's going on around us, is finally too fake for many. The establishment media is dying on its behind, fewer and fewer people drinking from that tainted trough. In the UK Parliament, the latest iteration of the Uni Party is mostly talking to itself, most recently voting to stop cold weather fuel payments, condemning thousands of our British elderly to death by cold, while simultaneously promising another £600 million to the war machine still grinding Ukrainian and Russian flesh. For the longest time, it was enough for the authorities to lead the chorus of ridicule and vilification of those who had seen through the fakery. The cry was conspiracy theory or granny killer or anti-vaxxer or Putin apologist or anti-Semite, any slur to get the job done and keep the hecklers at bay. Not for much longer, though. Here's the thing. Faster and faster people spot the trick, see beyond the sleight of hand to what the other hand is doing. I say again, it's all about money. The more we don't see, the more they get away with. Be aware the silencing, the censoring, the defamation, the locking up of dissenters will only get worse, because increasingly lying and threatening into silence or the jail cell those who call out the lying is all they've got. Freedom, the revelation of truth, is not going to rest on a new president in the White House or any prime minister in Downing Street. It's going to be about courage. It's going to be about courage because those who would lead us are cowards.